Few questions here, but to start, if elected, what would you do for the people of Southern Arizona? I know here we like to distinguish ourselves from Phoenix and, you know, instead of being clumped together. So what would you do for all of us down here?
Well, one of the first things I would do is be accessible. I hear that the current representative is not. And the way I increase community involvement and accessibility is setting up working groups on specific issues. For instance, I had a working group on immigration. Broad spectrum. It was dreamers, DACA recipients, businesses, faith-based groups. And we start every one of those meetings with the testimony of the dreamers or the DACA recipients. And their stories are so emotional, so many times tragic, and impactful, that we wanted to pass comprehensive immigration reform. We were making no headway in Washington whatsoever. So I thought, if we have these dreamers in Capitol Hill telling their stories, we can get this done. So I introduced legislation to allow dreamers and DACA recipients to work on Capitol Hill. That went nowhere in the Republican Congress, but that's the first bill I'm going to reintroduce after I'm elected. And you know, there's hardly anyone here in Tucson who doesn't know a dreamer or a DACA recipient or someone who is impacted by the lack of immigration reform. This is an area of distinction between me and my opponent. My opponent supports a wall at the border. I do not. I support comprehensive immigration reform that allows the Border Patrol to crack down on illegal activity, drug cartels, human trafficking, but lets people who just want to come here to better their families to do that legally. Well, I'm a former prosecutor, prosecuted in the Pima County Attorney's Office here, so I have zero tolerance for drug cartels and illegal activity. In 2010, I voted for a funding bill that would give the Border Patrol their resources so they could do their jobs. At that time, I was on the Homeland Security Committee. But now that that's done, we really need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And I meet with so many business people here in Tucson who say a third of our economy comes from Mexico. We don't want a wall.
All right. Let me think here. Now, education, you know, big thing. I even saw a Red for Ed sticker in the parking lot. Maybe it's someone here.
That's my car.
Oh, there you go. So,
yeah.
You know, what would you do for education? I think a lot of Arizonans, especially parents, are looking for some answers this election. What would you do to ease, you know, some troubles that we've seen recently?
Yeah, you know, my mother was a public school teacher. I'm a product of public schools. I have 3 grandchildren who will soon be in public schools, and I want them to have the best possible education they can get. I know that a lot of the funding comes from the state legislature, and teachers are really motivated in this election cycle to make sure that we elect local leaders who support education. At the federal level, there are 3 sources of funding that could help Arizona. One is funding for Head Start, which is a preschool program, really puts children on a path towards success. The other is secure rural schools. Every county in Arizona gets some of that money. And the third is payment in lieu of taxes. Let me explain what that is a little bit. Arizona is unique in that over 80% of our land is public land, either state or federal. We fund schools based on property tax. So we're losing about 80% of our property tax money because we don't have that private property. It's public instead. So payment in lieu of taxes was passed to help supplement and make up for that fact here in Arizona. Both of those programs, all of those programs were cut during sequestration and have not been restored. I would vote to restore that funding.
Alrighty. Now for health care, another big issue, you know, they're saying, a lot of people say it's no longer affordable, and then, you know, everyone with these pre-existing conditions gets kind of stuck, and our older Arizonans are frustrated, you know, paying more for that. So what would you do to kind of, you know, appease to everybody now with that?
I hear about healthcare concerns more than anything else. You know, I hear from families now that are really afraid they're going to lose their health care, which they finally now have. We have to address the affordability issue for them as well, but we also have to make sure they continue to get their care. So my idea, in many of these counties in Arizona where we have the marketplace, there's only one insurance carrier. And so what I would like people to be able to do is buy into Medicare at any age. So Medicare is a system that works, people like it, but it would be paid for because they're paying like an insurance premium to be enrolled in that. That would give them another affordable choice to provide health care. But you know, it's a huge issue for seniors as well. You know, they are really worried that Medicare and Social Security are going to be cut, especially after the Republicans passed that massive tax cut. And Speaker Ryan said, well, to pay for it, we're going to have to look at Social Security and Medicare. And those are health care programs for them as well. This is another distinction between me and my opponent. I'm fighting to protect Social Security and Medicare, and she wants to privatize it. And so we know what happened when Wall Street started their risky investments that led to the Great Recession. And a lot of people lost a lot of money. But just think if Social Security were being handled on Wall Street, if it's privatized, and those seniors would have lost their Social Security as well.
Now let's talk about jobs and the economy. We've seen Tucson come a long way, you know, so I've heard, but also in just my time here, I've seen a lot of new businesses come and that sort of a thing. A lot of people are saying, you know, Tucson's finally recovering. We saw Phoenix recover much faster from that recession in 2009. What would you do to, you know, continue this momentum down here?
Yeah, we need investments in infrastructure and transportation here. I was working on that with Mayor Rothschild when I was in office and want to resume that work. You know, the economy here in Tucson is not as good as it is in other places in the state. And so we really need to address jobs, good paying 21st century jobs. But you know, I talk with students graduating for the U of A, and they're really worried about whether or not they're going to get a job that pays them enough to make their student loan debt payments. It's a big issue. But also, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base is a big employer here. Want to make sure that that stays open. They have the resources that they need. Also, Fort Huachuca down in Sierra Vista, I support keeping those bases open. They're a big part of Southern Arizona economy.